In this lesson, you'll learn what ISO is and how it affects exposure. ISO, spelled out ISO, can be pronounced ISO or ISO, and depending on where you are in the world, you might hear both, and both can be used. ISO is the level of sensitivity of your camera to the light that hits the sensor. So the light travels through the aperture, remember, through your shutter, and then it hits your camera's sensor. It's basically a digital way of increasing or decreasing the exposure of your image. Increasing the ISO makes it brighter, while decreasing makes it darker. ISO options change depending on your camera, but usually start at 100 and go up by the power of 2. 100, 200, 400, 800, 3200, 6400, etc. Or even some cameras have them in between. Some newer cameras can go all the way up into the millions. Here we are with our same setup as before, and I'm at an ISO 100. By increasing the ISO, which on this camera I have to do so either with the touchscreen or going into the menu, I can show you that going up to 200 ISO increases the amount of light or increases the brightness of the image. We're not actually letting in more light, it's digitally enhancing the image to be brighter. So now at 3200, it's completely overexposed. Going back down, 800, 400, 200, 100, back to a relatively good exposure. So that's how ISO works. As you increase your ISO, you are doubling the sensitivity of your sensor. But increasing your ISO has some drawbacks because you are digitally enhancing your image. Increasing too much can lead to digital noise or grain in your image. So let's look at that in this quick demo. Here I'm going to take a shot at ISO 100. We're relatively well exposed, and when we zoom in on that, we probably won't see much digital noise or grain. But now I'm going to go up to an ISO, let's go all the way to 12,800, which is the max that this camera can go up to. Because I'm doing that, I'm going to have to compensate and adjust my shutter speed or my aperture to actually expose properly. And so now I'm going to snap another shot. And when we zoom in on those photos, you'll be able to tell that there is more digital noise and grain in the shot with the ISO at 12,800. With your camera, you should go out and see what ISOs are good and which ones have a lot of noise and grain. And for you as an artist, how much noise and grain can you live with your photos, and know that you shouldn't go above a certain ISO. Typically with most DSLR cameras, you shouldn't go past 1600 ISO. Some cameras, and especially some new mirrorless cameras, can go higher, but that's a general rule you can follow to know that if you push it past that, you're probably going to end up with some digital noise or grain. Some of the newest mirrorless cameras can practically shoot in the middle of the night. This is one of the best reasons to invest in a better camera, the ability to shoot in low light situations without having to use artificial lighting like flashes to expose.
All right, so I just shot 3 of the same photo, more or less, with 3 different cameras. The X-T2 from Fuji, the Canon EOS Rebel T5i, and the Sony a7R III. And it's really interesting to compare the ISO and sort of the noise, digital noise that happens with each of these. We really pushed each of them all the way up to 12,800 ISO, which is extremely high, and typically I would never shoot at this ISO. Just looking through the images, it's pretty clear that the Canon EOS is struggling a little bit more at this ISO, which is understandable. It's a much more economical camera. The Fuji X-T2 did pretty well from all things that I can see. There is a little bit of noise, especially when you zoom in a little bit more. And then the Sony a7R III, which is a full frame camera, so it's going to do better in low light automatically. There's still some noise in there, but all things considered, it still looks pretty good.
One thing you might hear is base ISO. What is base ISO? Base ISO is typically the lowest ISO number of the sensor on your camera that can produce the highest quality image without adding noise to the picture. Most modern cameras have a base of 100, so ideally you'd be shooting at ISO 100 to get the highest quality image. This might be different for your particular camera model, and you might have to do a little research to see what the best base ISO setting is on your model. However, it's not always possible to shoot at ISO 100 or the lowest level, especially when you're in a low light situation. So when should you increase your ISO? If you're shooting inside or at night, decreasing your shutter speed and opening up your aperture might be the first thing you want to do, but it might not be enough to get a properly exposed image. So in this situation, you may need to increase your ISO to just get a properly exposed image. But how do you balance all of these settings? How do you know when to change each one? That's coming up in the next lesson on the exposure triangle when we put it all together.